What's up guys, this is my prediction video for UFC 286, Edwards and Usman 3. It's in the O2 Arena, it's in London, and we've got 15 fights coming our way. Sorry this video is a bit late, but better late than never. Let's get into it. Okay, first fight of the night, we've got a flyweight bout between Veronica Hardy, otherwise known as Veronica Macedo, who's taken on Juliana Miller. And these two are only a couple of years apart in age, but they're in completely contrasting stages of their careers. Veronica joined the UFC at 20, didn't have much success, going 1-5. She hasn't fought in 3 years, and she's not really getting a tune-up fight here because she's going up against Killer Miller, who's fresh and coming off a win of the Ultimate Fighter. Now, Veronica's actually a pretty feisty fighter in the first round. She moves around a lot, she closes the distance well, she throws an insane amount of output. In her last fight, she threw over 100 strikes in the first round. She's got some nice striking. And for 5 minutes, she's actually a bit of a threat. You can see this in her one win in the UFC. She beat Polyana Viana by submission, which was quite surreal at the time because Polyana Viana used to be the BJJ world champion. But the problem is, once it gets out of the first, she slows down significantly, she gets gassed out, and she becomes really sloppy. Miller, on the other hand, is always trying to grapple. She's trying to grab her opponents and find herself a choke. I do actually favour Hardy's stand-up in the first round. I think she might be able to avoid Miller's takedown, score a lot on the feet. But after the first, I just think it's going to be downhill. She's coming off a 3-year layoff. She's known to have terrible cardio issues, and I think Juliana Miller's just going to outwork her. She's going to be the way fresher fighter, and if you ever look at her record, she's actually competed 13 times since Veronica Hardy last fought. She's got terrible cardio issues, and I think she's going to get choked out in the second round. Give me Juliana Miller, second round submission. If we see what the people are thinking, they've got 11% Hardy, 89% Miller. That's not surprising coming off a 3-year layoff. And if we check what the odds are saying, they've got Juliana Miller is a -500, a heavy favourite. Macedo plus 360. I definitely think Miller's going to get the job done, but I'm sick of betting on women's MMA, especially after JJ Aldrich last week as a big favourite, so I'm not going to bet this fight. But give me Miller regardless. Next up, we go to lightweight. We got Jai Herbert taking on Ľudovít Klein. And I think this is a pretty bad matchup for Jai Herbert. The two are going to be really close on the feet, but I think the big difference here is the wrestling of Ľudovít. Jai's shown in nearly all of his fights that he's pretty prone to getting held against the cage or getting taken down. He's been either taken down or controlled in his Nelson fight, Tapera, Trinaldo, Moicano. And I don't see it being different with Klein. I think it's going to be really close on the feet. Klein's going to push him up against the cage, take him down, and just ride him out for 3 rounds. I don't think it's going to be the most entertaining fight of the night, but give me Klein by decision. If we check what everyone thinks, they've got 30% Herbert, 70% Klein. And if we go to the odds, we've got Klein a -200, Jai Herbert a +160. It'd be cool to see Jai get it done. He's a well-rounded fighter, he's got good hands, and he's going to have the crowd behind him, but I think this is a favourable matchup for Klein. Give me Klein by decision. Next up, we're at flyweight. We've got Joanne Wood taking on Luana Carolina. And sure, Joanne Wood's won out of her last 5, but she's still going up against the top people in the division. We've got Jennifer Maia, Jessica Rai, Lauren Murphy, Tyler Santos, and Alexa Grasso. And she doesn't really get completely ran over in any of the fights. She's always looking pretty good on the feet. She's got real good Muay Thai. She doesn't look like she's got knockout power, but she still outpoints you on the feet. And I really like this matchup for Wood. I think it's quite favourable. Wood struggles whenever she gets taken down and controlled on the bottom, but I don't see Luana doing this to her. Luana's a striker herself, but she's not as technical as Joanne Wood. And she's coming off probably the most vicious knockout in all of women's MMA against Molly McCann last time they were at the O2 Arena. I think that's the kind of KO that changes people's careers. She's going to come out, she's going to be a lot more tentative. She's not going to want to throw down on the feet as much, and I think she's going to get outpointed, outscored by Joanna Wood to a decision. If we see what the people are thinking, they've got 27% Carolina, 73% Wood. There's more people on Carolina than I thought. If we go to the odds, we've got fairly close, -190 for Joanne Wood, +160 for Luana Carolina. I like Joanne Wood here, even though she's on a bit of a skid. She is getting a bit old at 37, but I think the old girl's got another one in the tank. Give me Joanne Wood, decision. Right, next up we go to flyweight. We've got Jake Hadley taking on Malcolm X Gordon. And this is a closer fight than what the odds will make you believe. Michael's wild on the feet, but I think he's going to be outgunned by Jake Hadley and his jab. And if he's got half a brain, he's going to constantly be shooting for takedowns because Jake Hadley has some of the worst takedown defense in the whole UFC. He's been taken down in every single one of his fights, and he makes it look way too easy every time. Once he's on his back, he doesn't scramble, he barely tries to get up. He does have some slick BJJ, but usually he's just spending the rest of the round on the ground. And you would hope that he's just been drilling his wrestling over and over because, quite honestly, it sucks. Malcolm X has shown glimpses of good wrestling in all of his UFC fights, and in particular, I found his Mokaev fight impressive. Sure, he did get finished in third, but it took 15 minutes to get there, and he won some of the grappling exchanges with Mokaev, which was quite surprising. I was this close to picking Malcolm for the big upset, and then I watched his fight against Sumu Daji, and it just completely put me off the pick because he got viciously knocked out by a couple of jabs, and Jake Hadley's known for a pretty nasty jab. So my pick is going to be Hadley by KO, or I can even see him getting taken down and submitting Michael Gordon from his back, but there's no way I'm betting on Jake Hadley or putting him in a parlay piece. His ground game's way too bad. And instead, I think I'm going to sprinkle a little prop bet on Malcolm Gordon winning by submission or decision if the odds are ridiculous. I can see a world where Jake Hadley's grappling still sucks and he gets rided out by Michael Gordon for 15 minutes. If we check what the people are saying, they've got 86% Hadley, 14% Gordon. So with that, you'd think it's a bit of a wash, but Gordon's definitely got a path to victory, and it's a lot closer than that. If we check out the odds, we've got Jake Hadley negative 375, Malcolm Gordon plus 290. If you're jumping on Jake Hadley at negative 375, I think you're nuts. He should probably get the win, but there's way too many questions. Keep your money and just enjoy the fight. Next up, we go to middleweight, and we've got the debut of Christian Leroy Duncan, who's taken on Duško Todorović. And here I'm picking Christian Leroy Duncan to get the job done. He was the defending Cage Warriors champion. He's only 27 years old, but he's got a lot of experience. He had 22 fights as an amateur, and he's since gone 7-0 since turning pro. He's very fast, explosive, he's got a flashy stand-up style. He's finished 85% of his wins and seems to have a pretty well-rounded game. He's got some nasty ground and pound finishes, some nasty finishes on the feet, but he has had a few fights where he's been taken down and controlled, which is a bit of a worry against Todorović, because Todorović has won all of his fights by taking his opponents down, mounting them, and raining down some pretty nasty ground and pound. His 3 wins were all against fighters who have now been cut from the UFC, and combined have a record of 3 wins and 14 losses. I don't think Todorovic's awfully good, but I think he might be able to survive this one and make it to the cards. Give me Duncan by decision. If we check out what the people are thinking, they've got 86% Duncan, 14% Todorović. I think it's a lot closer than that, but I can see why everyone's on Duncan's hype train. He's the Cage Warriors champion, and he's fighting at home. If we check the odds, we've got negative 210 for CLD, plus 165 for Todorović. I like that line. I think negative 200 is a fair price, and I could see him raising to negative 300 by the fight starts. Next up, we're at featherweight, and there's a real fun fight between Lerone Murphy and Gabriel Santos. Lerone Murphy was meant to be taking on Nathaniel Wood, but Nathaniel Wood pulled out due to an injury, so in comes Gabriel Santos. Both guys are undefeated, 11-0, taking on 10-0. Both guys are strikers, but Gabriel Santos has some pretty slick BJJ, and by all accounts, this should be one of the fights of the night. Now, the pick's definitely Lerone Murphy. He's had 4 fights in the UFC, and he has had the toughest schedule you can think of. He went up against Sibera Tukigov in his debut, Ricardo Ramos, Douglas Silva de Andrade, and Makwan Amirkhani. And he's managed to pass every test so far, which has been extremely impressive. Both these guys have great stand-up. I think they're both going to meet in the middle and put on a fun fight. I just favour Lerone Murphy because he's had a full training camp. He's 31, he's in the middle of his prime. I think he's got the edge and the power. He's going to have the crowd behind him. I think Santos is a real hot prospect to look out for, but there's just too much things going against him here. Give me Lerone Murphy by second round KO. If we check what the people are thinking, they've got 14% Santos, 86% Murphy. I think that makes sense. And if we check the odds, we've got opening line plus 138 for Santos, negative 175 for Murphy. I definitely think that line's subject to change and that Murphy's going to become at least a negative 300 favourite. 175 is good money. Give me Lerone Murphy. Next, we've got another flyweight fight. It's Mokaev taking on Jafel Filho, who's making his UFC debut. And Filho's coming off a beautiful performance on the Contender Series where he got a KO in the 3rd. His grappling looks great. He's fast at taking people's backs. He's always looking for a choke. And he's a really good prospect coming out of Brazil. The problem is he's getting thrown up against Muhammad Mokaev, who's the truth. He's one of the best prospects in MMA. He's gunning to be the youngest champion in history, and at this rate, he might just get there. And he's had 3 fights in the UFC, and he's made a huge statement in all of them. And I'm real excited to see the grappling exchanges between these two. I'm going to favour Mokaev. I'm going to take him to get a first-round submission, but Filho is definitely the type of guy that could spoil the party. If we see what everyone's thinking, not surprisingly, it's 95% Mokaev, 5% Filho. If we go to the odds, Muhammad Mokaev, negative 800 favourite, Jafel Filho, plus 550. I can't look at this fight and say Mokaev's a negative 800. I definitely think that Muhammad's line's a bit inflated. I think he deserves a negative 400, 500. Maybe that's just another prop bet where you just sprinkle a little bit on Filho by submission in case he ruins the party, because, man, these lines are out of control. Next up, we've got a lightweight fight. There's 2 people making their debut, and it's Sam Patterson taking on Yanal Ashmoz. And Patterson's quite a confident pick. There's a huge height and reach disparity in this fight. Patterson's massive for lightweight. He's 6'3". He's got a monstrous 78-inch reach. And he's going up against Ashmoz, who's apparently 5'9", but his legs are tiny, and he looks like he's more 5'6". Patterson should be able to keep Ashmoz at range, keep scoring points. He's got fast hands. He's long and lanky, but I've got to be honest, sometimes his stand-up looks really awkward, and he just leaves his chin directly up in the air, and he looks really hittable. The problem is, I think Ashmoz is so small that I don't think he's going to be able to reach Patterson's chin. And I think his only chance is if he makes this an absolute dogfight, which I doubt Sam Patterson's going to let happen. Ashman's also shown in his previous fights that he's pretty prone to getting out-grappled, and I think Sam Patterson's going to wrap him up with his long limbs and find a submission. If we check out what everyone thinks, they've got 9% Ashmoz, 91% Patterson. I can't argue against it. I can't see Ashmoz winning this fight unless it's a fluky KO. And if we check what the odds are saying, they've got Sam Patterson, negative 275, Yanal Ashmoz, plus 225. I definitely don't like someone debuting at negative 300, but I feel like he's got all the advantages in this fight. He should get it done. Give me Sam Patterson, submission. Next up, we got the lightweight division, and you might notice it's the second Chris Duncan who's making his debut on the card. It is Chris the Problem Duncan, who's taken on Omar Morales. And Duncan's making his debut after 2 stints on the Contender Series, which were both extremely dicey. In his first fight, he was getting pieced up by a jab, kept coming forward, kept eating punches, and then got knocked out cold in the second round. Goes back to the regional scene, picks up a win, and then gets invited back onto the Contender Series to give it another go. Comes out aggressive, but the same thing starts to happen. He gets pieced up by a jab again, gets dropped 3 times in the first round. Was on the ropes, looked like he was about to get finished, got up and just flatlined his opponent for this crazy comeback from behind win that gives you Pat Berry, Czech Congo vibes. If you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. And from what we've seen from this guy is he is just all gas, no brakes. He's extremely hittable, he gets dropped multiple times, he's got a sus chin, he doesn't take leg kicks very well, but he's got a hell of a heart, he comes forward, he's shown he's got good grappling, he's got some nasty ground and pound. And he's got a very tough debut ahead of him because he's got a massive experience disadvantage in this fight against Morales. Morales has fought way better competition. He's been a bit hot and cold in the UFC. He's only 2 out of his last 5, so he's been struggling as of late. But earlier in his career, he was looking like an absolute world beater. He uses his range well. He's got snapping leg kicks. He's an overall well-rounded fighter, but he's got a sus ground game, and he definitely slows down in the 3rd round. And this is a very hard debut because I think Duncan is definitely outmatched when it comes to the striking. Morales is hard to hit. He uses his distance well. But it's just hard because this isn't a 32-year-old Morales who's looking like an absolute killer. This is a 37-year-old Morales who's 2 out of his last 5. My brain's telling me Morales is the better fighter and that this fight might be similar to Morales' Contender Series fight when he took on a guy called Park, who sort of has a similar style to Duncan. He just kept coming forward and ended up getting knocked out in the 2nd round. But the problem is that I'm just sick of going with these older, aging vets who just keep letting me down. If this was a few years ago, I would have taken Morales, but I'm going to side with the younger, 29-year-old, hungry Chris Duncan, who's making his debut at home. He's going to be a lot hungrier. He's going to have the crowd behind him. I think his face is going to get mangled in the first round, but he's just going to keep coming back in the second, start to break Morales, and get a second round TKO. If we see what the people are thinking, they've got 19% Morales, 81% Duncan, which is nuts when you consider how sketchy Duncan's 2 fights in the Contender Series have been. If we check the odds, we've got basically a pick'em, and I completely agree with this. It's negative 105 for Chris Duncan, negative 115 for Morales, which is a fair line. Pick your side, basically. I'd recommend not betting on this fight because who knows what's going to happen. Next up, we go to featherweight. It's Jack Shaw taking on Makwan Amirkhani. And Jack Shaw's a bantamweight who's now moving up to the featherweight division. He's got a good record at 16-1, and he's coming off the first loss of his career against Ricky Simon. He's got good striking, good output, good takedown defense. And if you look at the odds, it makes you think that this might be a complete wash, but I've got to say, I think Makwan's actually got a good chance in this fight. His stand-up's decent himself. He's got some nasty submissions. He's won out of his last 5. He's been struggling lately. But for some reason, I think Makwan's going to do a wrestling-heavy approach. He's shown he's pretty good at wrestling. Jack Shaw's coming up a division, so Makwan might actually have some size on him. Bit of a big call, but I'm actually going to go Makwan Amirkhani by submission in the first round. If we see what the people are thinking, it is 5% Amirkhani, 95% Shaw. Looks like mostly everyone's on Shaw, not me here. Give me Amirkhani. And if we check the odds, we've got Jack Shaw, negative 550, Amirkhani, plus 390. I'm just not hot on Jack Shaw at negative 550. That's way too risky for someone moving up a division, coming off a loss, and fighting someone with the submission skills of Amirkhani. Give me Amirkhani submission. Next up, we've got an extremely important fight at middleweight. It's Marvin Vettori taking on Mr. Steal Your Girl, Roman Dolidze. Vettori is 3 out of his last 5. Dolidze is 4 out of his last 5, and both guys have been extremely impressive. Dolidze's on a killer 3-fight knockout streak. Vettori's only been fighting the upper echelon of the division for his last few fights, and this fight has real high stakes at middleweight. You know what you're going to get out of Vettori. He's a workhorse. He can do it all. He mixes in his grappling. He's got an iron chin. An obvious bet here would be for Vettori's chin to hold up and to win by decision. But I'm kind of feeling the upset. I'm going to go Dolidze to be the first guy to crack Marvin Vettori's jaw, move to 5 out of his last 5, and be seriously knocking on the door as a new contender for the title. I think it's now or never, nearly turning 35, and I just think all the momentum's with Dolidze. Give me Dolidze first round knockout. Let's look at what the people are saying. They've got 69% Vettori, 31% Dolidze. They're giving Dolidze some of a chance. If we go to the odds, Marvin Vettori's currently negative 300, Dolidze plus 230. Dolidze's a big dog, and I know it's risky, but I'm siding with the dog this fight to get it done. Next up, we got Jennifer Maia taking on Casey O'Neill. Maia's 2 out of her last 5. O'Neill's undefeated at 9-0. And I think this is going to be another fight where the momentum's on the side of one fighter, and that's Casey O'Neill. Casey's another example of these new generation of fighters that just come through and they wipe out the old. And even though Maia's a dangerous BJJ black belt, I think this fight's going to be a bit of a wash. I can see O'Neill taking the back of Maia and choking her out, making it look easy, and getting a submission in the first round. You've got to hope this is a showcase breakout performance for Casey O'Neill, with Shevchenko just losing the title, Grasso being the champ, Tyler Santos right there, Erin Blanchfield, Manon Farrot, Jessica Andrade, and now Casey O'Neill. This division is heating up. I think it's turning into the best women's division in the UFC, and O'Neill's going to be a welcome member of the top 10. If you see what people are thinking, they've got 19% Maia, 81% O'Neill. Thoroughly agree with that. If we go to the odds, we've got Casey O'Neill, negative 185, Jennifer Maia, 150. I'm quite surprised by that. I thought O'Neill would be negative 300 at least. Give me O'Neill by sub. Next up, we got Gunnar Nelson taking on Brian Bam Bam Barberena. And I'd love to tell you that this fight's about to be a banger, but we know it's not. Brian comes out looking to swing leather, and Gunnar Nelson does the absolute opposite. His game plan is to take you down and grind you out on the ground. If Barberena's got anything going for him, it's that he's the way more active fighter. He's fighting every few months compared to Gunnar Nelson's last 5 fights dating back to nearly 6 years ago. And although Gunnar's only 2 out of his last 5, he's actually losing to quite high-level competition. He lost to Santiago Ponzinibbio 5 years ago when you could argue he was more in his prime. He loses a split decision to the champ Leon Edwards, and then lost a decision to Gilbert Burns, which there's no shame there. And I think this fight's really obvious to call. I've just got Bryan Barberena's last fight against Rafael dos Anjos sketched into my mind, where he got taken down and just destroyed on the ground. And if RDA can do that, I'm pretty damn sure Gunnar Nelson can do it too. Give me Gunnar Nelson in another complete wash. If we see what everyone's thinking, they've got 82% Nelson, 18% Barberena. Definitely makes sense. If we check the odds, we've got Barberena plus 325 dog, Gunnar Nelson negative 450. I don't really like the negative 450 line on Gunnar Nelson, but let's be honest, we know what's going to happen. Unless he completely shits the bed, he shall win this fight. Give me Gunnar Nelson by submission or decision. And what's guaranteed to be the fight of the night, we've got Justin Gaethje taking on Rafael Fiziev. Gaethje's 3 out of his last 5, and Fiziev's on a 6-fight win streak. And before I go any further, I've got to say Justin Gaethje's been my favourite fighter in the UFC for a while now. Whenever I sit a friend down and try and convince them to become a fan of MMA, I sit them down and I show them Justin Gaethje's fight catalogue. I don't know if he can continue getting in the wars that he's been getting into, but as a fan, you've got to appreciate Justin Gaethje. He's coming off a loss to the previous champ Charles Oliveira in a fight that he knocked him down 2 or 3 times in the first round. And before that, he came off the actual fight of the year against Michael Chandler. Before that, he's going up against Khabib, Tony Ferguson, Donald Cerrone, Dustin Poirier, Eddie Alvarez. He's consistently fighting the best guys in the toughest division and putting on the best performances. And I can't not cheer for Justin Gaethje, but I've got to admit I'm hella biased. He's going up against Rafael Fiziev, who's an absolute machine on the feet. This guy's one of the best strikers in the UFC. His kickboxing's outstanding. His Muay Thai's outstanding. He's got the momentum. He's got the youth advantage. He's got the reach. And I think it might be a tough night for my boy Justin Gaethje. My brain's telling me Fiziev's going to get it done, but I'm going to go off the dog. I'm going to trust Gaethje to drag Fiziev into deep, deep waters and finish him in the third. If we check what the people are thinking, they've got 75% Fiziev, 25% Gaethje. Not giving Gaethje much of a chance. If we check the odds, we've got Gaethje plus 175, Fiziev negative 225. Give me the dog, Justin Gaethje. Main event of the evening, the welterweight championship, Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman 3. Can't wait for this fight. I'm backing Rocky Edwards. I just think he's got all the advantages. He's riding a big win streak. He's fighting at home. He's the champ. He's feeling good. Usman just got knocked out cold. Usman's brain took an absolute hiding from that leg kick. He broke his hand and had to recover that for the last few months. There was interviews with him just a few months ago and he was in a cast. The dude's knees are fucked. He has to walk downstairs backwards. He's nearly 36. He's in hostile territory. He's been promoting his own fight league. And there's been heaps of speculation that Leon Rocky Edwards gassed out so much in their first fight because they were at elevation at Salt Lake City. Which I really did believe, and I even said last week that I thought Romanov might have gassed out because it was Salt Lake City as well. But then Romanov gassed out in like 2 minutes last week, so I don't know how true that is. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Leon Edwards. I chose him in the last fight when he had a lot of things stacked against him, and I'm choosing him this fight when it seems like he's got a lot of advantages. I think Leon's going to come out with a new confidence, improved takedown defense. I'm going to say Rocky Edwards gets it on the cards. If we check what the people are thinking, they've got 62% Usman, 38% Edwards. That gives me a bit of confidence. I thought Usman would have been in the 70s. And if we check out the odds for the last time, we've got Usman negative 245, Edwards plus 205. I'm going off another dog. Give me Leon Edwards in his first title defense and to win the trilogy against Usman. Moving on to the parlay. If I was going to give you some anchors, I'd say Lerone Murphy, Casey O'Neill, Gunnar Nelson is paying a cheeky 3-1. If you want to make it a bit bigger but keep it safe, I'd say chuck in Christian Leroy Duncan and Joanne Wood. That's going to pay you a nice little 7-1. Maybe you're not feeling one of these guys. Maybe you want to swap or chuck in a cheeky underdog. I'd say Roman Dolidze at $3.10 and Leon Edwards at $2.85. That brings it up to a cheeky 61-1. A bit of a lottery ticket, but I definitely think it could hit. If I was going to give you some prop bets, I'd say Casey O'Neill by submission, Killer Miller by submission, Gunnar Nelson by submission, decision no bet on Dolidze, which means if Dolidze gets a finish, you get paid. and if it goes to a decision, it just gets crossed off your multi like you never had it. Duncan and Morales inside the distance. Murphy and Santos inside the distance. And if you're the kind of guy that wants to look out for a possible upset that's paying just ridiculous money, have a look at Malcolm X by decision or Makwan Amirkhani by submission. Good luck with your bets, like and subscribe. Peace.